This is Ankita,
And this is Nalini.
and you are tuned in to Prickly Pears, the podcast where we celebrate uninhibited brown women and their prickly points of view. This is season 3, called Spouse It Up, the season where we talk all about relationships, particularly a singular type of long term relationships that we've all been sold for a very long time. Without further ado, I'm going to ask our guest to introduce herself to us today.
Hey everyone, I'm Aditi. I'm 35 years old. I come from a family in Punjab, but I've grown up in a small town which is near the border of Haryana and Punjab. I am the youngest of three siblings, and by education, I am an MBA and an engineer. I've done 10 years of corporate, and after that, I felt like this was not my passion. COVID actually gave me some time to write my book, which is called Love Finds a Way. And so I took a break to write my book. And now I am actually on a journey to explore psychology and become a life coach. So I'm someone who is deeply moved by the things that, shape us into who we are. And currently I'm happily married for the last 3 years. I think that's it.
And I want to tell our listeners and Ankita where I found Aditi and why I wanted to chat with her because, like, on an email thread with thousands of people in our business school, I saw that Aditi was vouching for finding love the right way and finding lifelong partners. After her struggle of 8 years, she found her now husband, and she was telling other people like this. There was a chat about a group of singles trying to meet each other, and she was like, "I wish things like this existed when I was looking." So this got me really intrigued about her book, which is also about the same topic that we're going to chat about today. And like her protagonist in the book is based on her real life. And you told me that you went through arranged marriage setting for 8 years. Is that right? 8 years.
Yes, yes. So pre-MBA and post-MBA. So I have a flavor of both sides.
Where did you finally meet your husband? Was it arranged marriage?
Not really. I actually found him outside of that setup in my workplace. And I was not looking for love at that point of time. I was just fed up of the process, taking a break, and then I bumped into him.
So love found a way to plug in your book title. But before we get into how you found your soulmate and your partner, and soulmate is a heavy loaded word, so I won't use it again. But how you found your partner, before that, I want to ask about the arranged marriage process. You went into it very early in your early 20s, if I back calculating from your age now.
Yeah.
So, like very early in your early 20s, like what made you get into it so early? And so early is also subjective, but what made you get into it? And maybe tell us a little bit about your upbringing and how that led you to that decision.
So where I come from, actually, girls get married. Still, they get married at 21. Sometimes they are like considered of marriageable age even at 18. Although like now they are not married at 18, but still their basically rishta is fixed, if I were to quote that. So that's why when I was about 24, my parents were already in that zone of like, you're too old, or you've been working for 4 years, or now it's time that you start settling down. I have two elder brothers, and one of my elder brother, actually, for him, my parents also went the arranged marriage route, wherein it took about, I think, 2 years for him to find someone. And that's why they were like, oh, if you start looking today, it will take at least a year or 2 years. So by the time you're 26 or so, you'll have found someone, and that's a good age. So why don't you start? And honestly, at that point of time, I was still in that zone of why do we get married? But I did speak to a few elder friends of mine at work, and they told me that eventually all your friends do get busy with their own lives, and it's good to have a partner who can, be with you. And I took that word of advice as like wisdom from someone older and someone I respected. So I thought, okay, let me start. I did have a boyfriend at that point of time, but when I started talking marriage to him, he was not ready at all. He was not ready to commit. He was like, oh, no, 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 this is not something, like he kept, first of all, evading my questions. And then eventually ended up like telling me that, oh, my parents will never approve of you and all that. And that's why when I realized that, you know what, this is probably not something that will go this way, so let me try my parents' way.
But like now, I'm very curious about this guy. Like, why did he think that his parents won't approve?
I honestly don't know. It could just be that he was not ready, or maybe he saw something that I didn't know about his family, about the kind of daughter-in-law they expected. But then I don't know why he was dating me.
Was he your first boyfriend or were there boyfriends before him?
First boyfriend. Before that, like before that, I had one-sided love, but that never panned out.
And how long were you with him for?
About 2.5 years. So we were like, we met in college, we became girlfriend, boyfriend, and then we were dating even into our work life. But we were friends first, so that's why the dating did not start right at college. And later on, we started dating, but then eventually it didn't pan out.
So, when you were younger, like in your preteens or early 20s, well, before 24, what was your opinion on marriage and did it cross your mind at all? What did you think of long-term relationships?
I have actually two elder brothers, and I had seen marriage very closely. So my perception of it was that yes, it's a companionship, but I was also very aware of the patriarchy that comes with it. Because I had seen it in my own house as to, how a daughter-in-law is treated differently from a daughter, or, the expectations are different at least. And it's not never explicit. It's very subtle. Like if it's not on the clothing, then it's on the kind of household work you are expected to do, or the kind of rituals you are expected to follow. Maybe the daughter is not set to follow all those things, but the daughter in law has to follow everything. So, those were the things I was very closely observant on, and that's why I think I had very strong opinions of what I want in a life partner from very early on. I did not want a partner who would treat me as someone who's there in the house and not as an equal. So, that's something I was very clear on very, very early on.
And did your boyfriend map to that? Like was he the partner that you envisioned? Like did he match all the criteria?
So, now that I think of it, not really. But I think I was just stupid in love, and I didn't evaluate from that angle at that point of time at all.
So tell me this. I was on bharatmatrimony.com and the websites. I think when I was 25, 26. Like your parents were optimistic when they said that you'll find someone in 2 years. My parents probably knew me better and they said, it'll take you a good 5, 6 years. So now's the time to get onto it. And I am really curious, like how did you feel when you were first on these sites?
It was very daunting at first. So I think the first hurdle I had was I knew like my brother went through the arranged marriage process, like I told you. So I was very wary of this that, in 3 meetings or 4 meetings, I have to decide whether I want to marry this person. And I'm someone who generally takes a long time to trust people and open up. So I was like, how will I do this? So I started negotiating with my parents that, I'll date someone for 6 months and then only I'll say yes. And they were like, you're not being practical, shut up. No one is gonna wait that long. Yes, you can take some time, but doesn't mean that you can take 6 months. We can't do 6 months. Then how will you find someone in 2 years? Blunt answer was that. And on the matrimony sites front, honestly, it was very scary. Creating that whole biodata itself was like, what is this? Why do I have to include personal details, where you live and what are your hobbies? But then you have to include family details, all those things. And it was very new to me. And I kept asking my parents very different questions in terms of, why do we have to include family details? And they were like, it's important. It's just needed. That's how it is.
Can you elaborate on family details? Like obviously I remember from my days from when I put up my details like height, weight, skin color and they will give you shades, right? Like wheatish, whatever, fair, things like that. But like what about the family did you have to include?
So for the family, it's like where your family comes from, and it doesn't stop at your mom and dad. What does your mom do? What does your father do? It is also about your extended family. What are your, let's say, father's brothers doing, and how many kids they have? What are your siblings doing? How many kids they have? All they want to know everything about the family. So earlier, actually, I fought with my parents and said, let's not include any of it. But then again, the biodatas they received had all those information, and they were like, you know what? People ask us these questions on the phone, it might as well be included. Like, apart from the Kundi details and, like you said, the complexion details, even your CTC for that matter is included in that.
That's India. So just to like clarify, CTC is what cost to company, right? Like basically how much you're making. So we're being modern by letting the woman work. Let's just at least know how much she earns.
And it's both ways. And it's not like just for the women, for the men also, it's included in the biodatas.
So tell us more. Tell us more about the people you met. Did you meet a lot of men through the
Yeah,
sites?
yeah, a lot of.
Okay, so then let's go timeline wise. Talk about pre MBA. Like, what surprised you? What shocked you?
So before my MBA, I think it was one of the first few people I met. He was a businessman. I had told my family that I had put in a condition that the one thing that I don't want to give up is my job, because I knew that, especially in Punjab, that's something that's very expected of women, that, yeah, after marriage, you won't want to work. So I told them, and they were like, fine, we'll tell this to the prospects' parents. And they told them that. Till when the guy spoke to me, he was asking me, all these questions of, in the first conversation itself, he started talking to me about a job shift like near to his hometown or where he was living. And I was like, you know what, first of all, we are in the same city. We were in Delhi, like two ends of Delhi. And I was like, it's in the same city, and second is, let's see where this goes, and then we'll talk about all this. But then he brought it up with my father, and my father asked me that, he was asking me this. And I was like, I have spoken to him once, let me just get to know him. But then that question came back still in the second conversation. And then he started talking about kids and everything. And, like, you know what? If you travel so much for your work, then how will you take care of the house? How will you take? I would not want nannies to take care of the kids. And I was like, what is this? Like, it looked like he wanted a housewife, but he was okay with having a working woman. But that's something that's like, yeah, okay, if you can do, you do it. Otherwise, if it's problematic for the household, you can't do it. So that was just absurd to me.
Like I've heard stories from my friends that people ask things like, have you ever eaten non-veg? Have you, like, were there ever, or like, do you drink alcohol? Have you tasted alcohol? Were questions like this asked at all?
So luckily, I'm a vegetarian. I was never asked the question of non-veg, but I have been judged for alcohol, for drinking it and for not drinking it, both ways. There was one guy with whom I told him that I drink. And then we were in the afternoon somewhere, we were eating something, and then he asked me, like, do you want something else to drink? And I said no. And then he was like, oh, you only drink alcohol, is it? And I was like, what? Then there was this other guy who was again, I was very transparent. I told him occasionally drink. And then he was like, oh, okay, so let's drink. It was the first time I was meeting him. I was not very comfortable. I'm meeting you for the first time. I would want to be in my senses and not get wasted. So I said no. And then he just judged me on that and never spoke to me again.
Wait. Let's rewind a bit. Nalini, you said you also had a profile on these matrimonial websites?
Yeah, for a bit when I was already like, I think when I turned 30 and all my, I think 8 to 10 relationships had been a disaster, then I was like, what's the harm? Like, this is another dating app. The funny part was I was in Singapore then, and it was so hard to find Indian men on dating apps. Like, you had to go, and for some reason I only wanted Indian men at the time. So you would meet the same person sometimes from a dating app and from a matrimony app. Like, I even went to, because I rejected like the community based arranged marriage. So I thought I'm being modern. I registered for this thing called iitIIMshadi.com where they find you like really educated people, and you have to submit your degrees to you have to submit your degree to be like, they qualify you if you're from an Ivy League of India or not before they let you in. So yeah, I met like some private equity bankers and people like that through through those. Yeah, well, it was quite funny.
Okay, now coming back to Aditi. Aditi, did your experience after MBA change or was it the same? Because you said you had different stories.
Also, after MBA, the problems were different. Now it was that I was not working. I belong to the North Indian part of the country. and now I was working in southern India. So the problems were, oh, she's working so far. We don't want to talk to a woman who's working so far. She earns too much. She's just done her MBA, and her salary will keep increasing. So we don't feel comfortable talking to her because she's earning more. So there was this one guy wherein I was earning almost equal to him, but he told me that my salary has almost plateaued and yours will keep increasing because you're just like 6 months out of your MBA. So I was like, yeah, but things can change. What if I end up doing a business one day, or I'm not interested in working? What then? Then he's like, oh, you're interested in doing a business, then your salary will, or your income will increase even multifold. And he kept fixating on that. And I was like, okay, if you're not comfortable, then let's not talk.
This is really funny because when we had my profile up on these matrimonial websites, we had my CTC on it. And after a few unsuccessful meetings, apparently someone took a look at my profile and was like telling my parents, why don't you just pull down her numbers a little bit? We'll get more indicators of interest then. And I was like, this is so absurd. Like, isn't the entire premise of having a biodata and, like getting into a relationship based on honesty? And they were like, yeah, yeah, like no one's going to, pull out your bank slip or pay slip and check the exact numbers. A little bit here and there is absolutely all right.
One would think people would want dowry and stuff, right? They would like traditionally they wanted dowry. So that number like being high is perpetual dowry. But no, they want the parents' money. They don't want the girl's money. But like very curious for the both of you, Ankita and Aditi, like did you ever encounter like this dowry kind of situation, indirect, like gifts, and if not dowry, like how much will you spend on the wedding and things like that?
So in North India, it's very common. And it's not discussed with the bride and groom, it's discussed between the parents. And it's not in the sense of dowry or gifts, it's discussed in the sense of how much are you going to spend on the wedding. And like I kept telling my father also that let's not talk about these things in these ways, but again he also kept telling me that this is not how things go, this is what it is. It's very common. It's disguised as gifts, it's disguised as, oh, we love our daughter and that's why we are doing this. But that's very normal, at least in the region that I grew up in.
I'm not sure how complete my experience is, but no family that I interacted with or my parents interacted with brought this up. In fact, some of the families were like, "Oh, we'll do everything. Don't worry about it. Just like get married."
So you did meet like decent, at least decent families, if not good men.
For sure, I was extremely young and probably stupid when I met these guys. And like when I look back, like some of them had potential, but I probably didn't want to get tied down and I had different dreams of my own.
So I want to cut now to Aditi to when you gave up. Like, why did you give up on the marriage apps and the arranged setup suddenly at one point?
I did not give up, I got frustrated, and there were cycles of that. I got frustrated in the middle, like multiple times, I would say, rather, in those 8 years, because 8 years is a very long time. Initially, so I did not have a criteria as such. My parents had that criteria that they want, a banya from a Punjab. But I didn't have a criteria set, not from even the education point of view. I thought I would rather have a conversation with the person and like see if that works out. But then I started realizing that, this doesn't work that way. I'm getting burnt out by just talking to stupid people. So eventually I ended up like, I think I rejected two, three good people just because I was too tired. So that was the reality of it. And then I was like, okay, let me have a criteria. So I had then a criteria that once in your lifetime you should have done something significant. So for me, I am a very engineer MBA kind of a person. I did the math of the probability of finding someone who fits your criteria, your parents' criteria, and is single and like gets to connect with you. That's like very rare. So I was like, I am kidding myself if I'm thinking every someone will fit into that criteria, especially post MBA. If you want that kind of a thing that he should earn more than you, he should be at least as educated as you, all those things, that's not gonna work. So my criteria was that as a signal, I want someone who is capable. So at least once in their lifetime, they should have done something nice, which is like significant in terms of, let's say, in their school education, maybe they scored very high, or they didn't score as much, but in converting their jobs, they got a job at a very good company. Or even that was average, then in their masters or any kind of further education, they did something epic. So again, this was, I know, not a great signal, but something very tangible for me to look at, that yes, if there is a need, then you can do something substantial in life, and only then I'll talk to you. Otherwise, like, I'm not wasting my time on you.
So, Aditi, I know we had this chat before where I asked you, and I'm going to ask you for Ankita and all our listeners again, like, why did you want the person to have to be capable of doing something major, right? How does that relate to now? Like, Ankita and I both live in Europe now, and like, this is if you tell a European person this, and we know it's very common in India, but if you tell a European this, like they will just be flabbergasted. Like, why would your ability to live a happy life with someone have anything to do with what they will do professionally or in their education, right? But you had given me a very good answer.
So actually, my reason for this was in fact twofold. I wanted a partner who treats me as an equal. So I want respect from my partner. And in return, I also want to respect my partner. So for me to be able to respect you as a person, I need to know that you can go through the grind when there is need. And this is the easiest indicator for me. Again, like I said, in the biodata, there is nothing else that will tell me you might be earning 50 lakhs per annum, but I don't know what you've gone through. And these are some indicators for me.
And in a heap of marriage resumes, like how does one even shortlist? Otherwise, you'll just get burnt out. None of us, all three of us, none of us really found anyone through all of this dating and marriage app fatigue. I would love for our listeners to try this out and give us some feedback on whether this works. But that's a very interesting way to look at it.
It's definitely a smarter move than what I did. I did all of those things that Aditi talked about, right? I looked for someone who was as educated as I was, earned as much as I did or more. And my reasons were nowhere as profound as what Aditi said, right? Like I was just like, oh, like I want someone who can take care of me if tomorrow I decide to, do a career pivot or sit at home and I probably shouldn't be saying this on a public forum, but like if I wanted to just take life easy, the man would be able to support that, at least for a while.
But like I'll just quickly share a story before we move on, Ankita. At least yours was still more logical. At one point of time, because I grew up in an army upbringing, army setting, I couldn't imagine my life in the civilian world, as they call it. So, but obviously I wanted to work and I wanted to be successful in the corporate world. So I didn't know how these things would match. I dated like an army officer, an air force pilot, like all sorts of IPS officer, all sorts of people, but none of that worked out. But still, in my mind, the best option was to find an infantry guy in the army because they are always away. Like 3 years they stay away, and then 2 years they stay with you, and then 3 years they stay away. And brains and smartness and intelligence was definitely my criteria, just like you, Aditi. So I was like, okay, if I can find an intelligent infantry guy who stays away most of the time, so I can have the army life. I can be wherever I want, and then he can come and stay with me whenever he has leave, which is 2 months in a year. So 2 months we stay together, and like 9 to 10 months he stays away, which is the best of both worlds. But obviously, like my dad would kill me, but like finding an intelligent infantry guy is very hard. So that search ended, obviously.
And now you're stuck with someone who stays with you all the time.
Not even leave the home. Like he works from home to get a break. I have to go outside of home to get a break. Yeah, so there goes my me time.
So, Aditi, tell us now, who are you with? What's his name? What criteria did he fit? Where did you find him?
My husband's name is Raj. I met him at work. So when I met him, I was going through a depression because of this whole arranged marriage search. Because eventually I ended up believing that everything is my fault. I'm earning too much. I'm not probably, good enough, or I'm not worthy of that kind of a love. Because I saw many of my friends, in fact, all of my friends get married. They even started having kids, and I was still single. And that hits you that your friends are now in a very different phase of their lives. They don't even have as much time for you. And it's not their fault, but eventually you are hit with loneliness. And That was the time I was also fed up of talking to people. So at that point of time, I was just taking it slow. I was working on myself, and I had just moved to back to Delhi, and I did not have friends in the city anymore. So I was thinking in the sense that let me now work on this new job, find friends in this new job, and make that a very stable part of my life. And then I like start thinking about all these things also again. That's where I was when I met him. So in fact, he had also moved to Delhi, and he was new in the city, and I was new in the city, and both of us did not have friends. We met through a mutual office colleague for a coffee, and he only told us that, you know what, you guys basically don't have friends. I'm married, but you guys don't have friends. Why don't you hang out? And that's why once or twice we started hanging out. Then we realized that, oh, we really gel together. So I remember our initial conversations, they were like they would easily go up to 3 hours or so when we were hanging out, and we would not realize where the time went. I could see we connected on our values, and even then, nothing crossed my mind of the sort that, this can be my life partner. Honestly, there were different hang-ups in my own head also. He was 4 years younger to me, he was junior to me at work, and all those things were there in my head. And I was like, I don't think even he'll be serious about like finding a life partner. Forget about anything else of my criteria. And anyway, like I said, I was looking for stability. I was like, this is a good friend, let me just be good friends with him, let's not disrupt anything here. That happened, but then eventually we did start hanging out more. And there was a time, crucial time, when I was actually learning, like I said, I was working on myself also simultaneously. So I started learning how to drive a car, and he offered to help. And that's why we have started hanging out daily, because then you have to meet daily. That's when we started realizing that we are very similar as people in thought processes. And that's when we both of, and it was not, in fact, ever like, he quoted me or I quoted him, or, we were after each other. Nothing like that happened. We realized that we are a good fit. Let's start dating. That was the conversation we had.
So it wasn't love, it was a good fit. Is that it? Like was love a part of it?
So there were feelings, of course, but again, at that moment, I did not realize that whether it's love, what is it? I feel attracted to this person. I really like talking to this person. I enjoy his company. So why not date him?
What does he say if you ask him now? Like, was it the same for him or?
So even he had a similar story. I've asked him this before. He's like, I respected our friendship way too much to even like make a move. But then eventually when I realized that there was interest from both sides, by the time we started dating, we had shared all our like past drunk stories, past relationship stories, all those stories of our friendships also. So that's why we were very connected already. And hence it was like very clear that, you are looking for someone, I'm looking for someone, and looks like we are very interested in each other.
So how did that go to marriage? Like from there to getting married?
So honestly, he was against the institution of marriage when I met him, and I was very skeptical by that time, because it was, I think, about 7 years into me trying to find a life partner. And I was like, oh my god, I eventually found a guy who likes me and I like him, and now he's against marriage. What will I do? So I asked him, why don't you want to get married? I was expecting a typical response that, I don't want to be tied down and all those things. But the answer he gave me was that in marriage, generally, it's the women who are affected by the patriarchy the most. And I'd never want my partner to go through that. And hence, I never want to get married. And I was just blown away by that answer. Who thinks like that? Who are you?
Then I have to ask, like, why did you get married?
So, one is that I had pressure from my parents. I knew that I can't do without getting married. And he finally accepted that, yes. So, what happened was he was ready to commit to me. But I told him that, yes, if you're committing to me, that marriage is non negotiable for me, because my parents won't feel good if I don't get married. Honestly, in hindsight, I don't think marriage was necessary, but I think it just makes society more comfortable. It makes easier for things easier for you as a person. Legally you're bound to each other, so it's easier getting a house, it's easier getting your passports together, all those things. But having said that, if you're committed to each other in your life on a day-to-day basis, it doesn't make a lot of difference. But commitment is key. Again, I know there are a lot of people who don't commit and stay together, and okay with that for like personally, again, it's my opinion that with for some time it's okay, but if you don't have an end date to it, then it's like for one person it'll end in heartbreak for sure. At least that's my hypothesis.
And I think that brings me to the crux of this season. Like, if there was an alternate world where being partners and not being married gave you the same kind of legal rights and had societal acceptance, would you have done something differently?
I would have been happy without marriage also. Just committing to this one person. I was raised as a person who believes in forever. And my husband always kept telling me that these are too heavy words, and it's not like I don't want to commit, but these are very heavy words. They can make you feel trapped eventually. And now I think I agree with him because this option of, yes, if I want to, there is an out. And people can grow apart. I always say marriage is not like a trophy that you have to win. After that, there is a journey. You have to grow together as people.
Then now I'll ask one of Nalini's favorite questions. What's your opinion on polyamory?
So I am a very monogamist kind of a person right now. That works for me. I have not considered, or rather, I would say I have not felt that I'll be comfortable.
But you must have had crushes on multiple people at the same time, right? You were talking about one sided love. Hasn't that happened to you ever?
Yes, it has happened that I've had crushes on multiple people at one point of time. But generally, that's just in your head mostly, right?
But monogamy, I would argue that monogamy and polyamory or whatever is all in your mind. If you're okay to imagine having sex with three different people or three people at the same time or different whatever, and you're physically doing it, then it's the ethics and morals of it that's stopping you, not the fact that you're monogamous by nature.
So isn't it more than that though? Because when you are with one person or multiple people, it's not just about who you are attracted to or who you are having sex with. It's about who you are growing with and living day in, day out with. That's more intimate than just having sex with someone. That's the part of your life that you don't share with anyone else. When you're married to someone, you're daily working with them, living with their quirks, your quirks in the same house, and that's very intimate. And I don't know if you put four people or three people in that mix, how will that work out? I'm not sure.
True. There is a lot to polyamory than just having multiple sexual partners. I was listening to this absolutely amazing podcast episode that I would highly recommend if you are interested to learn more about polyamory. And I'll link it in the show notes. They define polyamory as a consensual non monogamous relationship that can be either romantic, sexual, or intimate. And it doesn't have to be all of the three, it could be one or two. And it reminded me a little bit of our joint family system that we had in India for the longest time. It wasn't a romantic or sexual relationship that you had with the many people who were living with you, but it was definitely intimate in some sort. And the way I think of it was just polyamory is that with your chosen family, just not your genetic one.
Yeah, or even like household, right? Like a household. Just generally, anybody can be part of household across. Anyway, bringing us back to getting married to Raj. Where is Raj from? What is his family like? Were they as accepting of marriage or disapproving of marriage as him, or how did that work out?
So he's born and brought up in Pune. His family is a traditional Rajasthani family who's lived in Maharashtra for the longest time. Of course, like on paper, we were both very wrong for each other. He's 4 years younger than me. He's less educated. I'm 1 foot shorter than him. I am darker than him. I am heavier than him. So, on both sides, there were problems. So, I think what worked in our favor is that family knew that he doesn't want to get married. So, they were happy that, acha chalo, if at least he's getting married. With my family, they had already been through everything for the last 8 years, and they were like, fine, you are happy with someone, we are okay. But yes, there were subtle, their disapprovals would come in, but not at the face of that, don't marry this person. It was more like, how will you manage this? How will you manage that? That did happen. But one, we were both very transparent with each other. even about our families, which I think couples don't often do. So before even getting married, we had very deep conversations about, the kind of wedding we want, the kind of involvement we want from our families, the kind of lifestyle we want post marriage. We, in fact, even talked about whether we want to have kids or not. So, all these things we did discuss in detail, and us being transparent with each other and being sure about each other. That helped us because even with our families, right, it was very clear that this is not an option that we are giving you. This is a decision that has been made.
And that led you to do a very, very small wedding, right? And why was that?
So both of us actually really didn't understand the logic of spending so many lakhs of rupees on a big fat wedding. We were both people who wanted a court marriage. Like again, he was anyway against the institution of marriage. So he was like, let's just, you want a piece of paper, we'll get a piece of paper. With me, it was, I was like, yeah, I don't mind the way the ceremony is done. And I was always also against this whole concept of a big fat wedding where like 90% of the people are unhappy. And I've seen weddings in my household also that 90% of the people are either there for the food or dancing or the dressing up or just to, do something else, but not the agenda is not the bride and groom. That's why we actually ended up doing a 15 people wedding. So the good thing was that there was COVID. It helped us convince our parents also a little bit, but also there was this aspect of wherein we didn't want any kind of gifts to be exchanged, even 1,000 rupee gift to be exchanged. And both of us were very clear on that. And my parents, who've been brought up in the kind of system wherein this is just a given, it was very tough for them to understand it. Eventually, I mean, it was just that, this is the way it is. This was non-negotiable for us. That's something eventually they were happy about it. They were like, oh, we never thought like this can also happen. Weirded out by it, but eventually, like, this is actually good. This is simple. This makes life very simple. You go to a small wedding, you attend, you come back, and that's it. There is
Hmm.
no 15-day of planning or like 4 months of planning. So, made our parents meet in November, and our wedding was in December. So it was, and we both planned the wedding. So it was like 20 days, 25 days of planning that led to it, wherein people plan for 6 months, 8 months, a year, more than that for a wedding.
And you didn't really leave a choice for your parents to dislike each other or anything or have a say. Like you had already they set a date. So, like, even if they didn't like each other, nothing could have been changed.
So honestly, we did make them meet each other. And but the point is that again, both of us were very clear that how many times will they meet? They'll probably meet twice a year maximum. They live in different cities. If they're cordial with each other, we are fine with it. And that's like how we even set the expectations also that yes, meet, and if you gel together, great. If not, then just be cordial and it's fine.
I want to ask Aditi one final question. On though you had the formula that you started your or restarted your search with on the apps and arranged marriage. Did Raj fit your formula?
He did. In hindsight, he did. At the time, I don't think I evaluated him
Or
that
now
well.
you would like to say? Come on, Aditi, you can be honest.
No, honestly, I was not basically thinking of that, but I did encounter questions from my friends, close friends. I was told, oh, he's 4 years younger to you. He'll never be serious about you. He's earning lesser than you. Won't you have problems in the future? I was asked these questions and I was like, you know what? I'll figure it out. For me, the point was that I can't live without this person. I don't think like I can find someone better than him who's more suited for me. And having said that, it did fit my criteria of he has done something very substantial in his career once, even though at that point of time he was earning lesser than me. But of course, like if I'll take the present day situation, he is earning his a very good salary. And in fact, I've left my job and I'm working on a full career pivot. So you don't know what future holds. And like I think I'm a testament to that.
And will that be your advice to our listeners who are looking through arranged or happenstance ways or are in situationships? Now, I'm just trying to use the word situationships because I learned it in the last like two episodes back. Would that be your recommendation?
Like I said, look for potential. Don't look for basically things that are for the now. Because now a person might be doing very well, but what if they don't have the capability and eventually 5 years down the line that doesn't happen? Then what? It can take a turn for the better or the worse because, like I said, marriage is a long journey. It's not like the end of the race. So look for potential, and also something that I learned through my journey is be realistic in expectation. So this is something that I realized that I wanted an equal partner. So if I want an equal partner, there will be disagreements. I can't be thinking of oh, we'll never fight and all that, because of course both of you have an opinion. So similarly, I've seen people who are, oh, I want a very good looking partner. Fine, you want a very good looking partner, but then they'll invest time on themselves and they might not have energy to spend a lot on relationship or, giving you time. If you are someone who needs a lot of attention and you're looking for someone who's very good looking, you are setting yourself up for a disappointment. Like, weigh your options in that way, that be realistic, because every positive will have a con side to it. Like I said, for me, for an equal partner, there is a side that you will have conflicts all the time. Like, be ready to, it can't be both ways.
Ankita, that's for you.
Yeah, I know. Um, Aditi, I'm going to take us to a rapid fire round. These are essentially questions that we're asking each guest this season to learn more about relationships, take what we can. And because we were talking about conflict, here's my first question. We're going to start with how often do you fight?
Very often. Once a month, I would say.
That's not very often. Who starts the fight?
I think it's different both ways for us. Like, he'll say something, and I'm the one who starts a discussion on it. I want to talk.
And do you have similar or different conflict resolution styles?
Very different resolution styles. He's the one who wants to take space and, like, think by himself and then come back. And I'm the one who wants to talk, discuss, figure out a solution together. So very different styles. We are still finding a midway.
This is something I've noticed in most conversations. Women like to talk it out, and men like to take time away and think about it. Okay, do you sleep in the same beds, or different beds, or a mix of both?
So more or less we sleep in the same bed, but our sleep times are very different because he's a night person and I'm a morning person. It's like half the night I'm sleeping alone, half the morning he's sleeping alone. That happens. Of course, on weekdays that doesn't happen, but otherwise on weekends and all, or if there is holiday, that happens.
Okay, how do you manage finances? Because one of you is earning and one of you is not.
So I'll give you actually a twofold answer. When both of us were earning, honestly, since we were friends, we had a split-wise account group for both of us for the longest time, even after we got married, because we were just in the habit of splitting everything. Having said that, now what we have done is we spend one salary, like when we were both earning, spend one salary and save one salary. That's what we were looking at. Now we are looking at spending part of his salary, saving part, and then whatever I am earning right now is saved.
Okay, and do you have same accounts? Do you have your own individual accounts? Do you share passwords and login IDs for your bank accounts?
We have independent accounts. We don't have a joint account yet. We haven't felt the need for it yet, but we do keep transferring each other money. We don't have account passwords for each other's accounts. We do have our phone passwords. Of course, like, it's accessible, but we don't access it.
Okay, and then if you want to buy, say, a luxury bag or something nice for yourself, do you have like a regular budget to be able to do that?
So generally, it's ad hoc. Honestly, I'm not someone who does that very often. But I think if I have to do that, or in general for a bigger expense, let's say, I have my eyes set on something and really want to buy, it's more ad hoc, but it also involves a discussion with both of us. Can we afford it right now? Because it's a single income household right now. When we were both earning, it was very different. You spend your money, I spend my money, it's fine. Now we have a discussion like, can we afford it? And it's the same for even trips. We love travel and we really want to spend on trips, and that's when this kind of discussion happens, because travel is a big expense. That, can we really afford two trips in the next 6 months, or can we afford only one trip in the next?
Brilliant. And then because you mentioned kids earlier, do you want kids? Do you not want kids? Were you on the same page or did it take some convincing from either of you?
So both of us were actually on the same page on this. We both don't want kids.
Awesome. That makes things easy. Okay, my last question for you. How do you define romance? What's the last romantic thing either of you've done for each other?
In fact, today he brought me flowers.
That's nice.
So it's very impromptu, I'd say. It's not limited to occasions. It's more like, and we both understand that we both have very different love languages. So I'll make something for him. He'll cooks for food for me as an act of love. So very impromptu, very I would say it's not limited to a day like okay, on the anniversary this is gonna be done. That's not the case.
That's all the questions I had for you today. I definitely took away a lot of tips and tricks from our conversation. I'm sure Nalini did too, and so did our listeners. Before I let you go, any last things you want to share with us?
I would say one, read my book. You will find more of my story. It's called Love Finds a Way. It's available on Amazon. There is a Kindle version for people outside India. That's one thing. And the second thing I think I would want to leave the listeners with is be very realistic in your expectations and please check those expectations with a friend or anyone trusted that, is this realistic? Because I think that's where we are all taking a hit right now. We want best of all the worlds, and that's somewhat not possible.
I agree. I think I also need to go back and recalibrate my expectations. But thank you, Aditi, so much for being so open and honest about all your experiences and sharing them with us. On that note, on the behalf of Prickly Pears, this is Ankita, and we are out.